Well, now here, the first victims of the tainted blood scandal gave often harrowing evidence today at the opening of an inquiry into how so many people were infected with viruses, including hepatitis C and HIV, during the 1970s and 1980s. More than 3,000 people have died and continue to die, including many with haemophilia, who were given products derived from blood from drug users and prisoners in America. Our health and social care correspondent Victoria MacDonald spoke to the wife of one victim who died late last year.
Steve Diamond did not live long enough to tell today's inquiry his story. He died in December, aged 62, infected with hepatitis C from contaminated blood products given to him in the 1970s for his haemophilia.
I asked for short tributes at his funeral from a few friends who'd known him at different stages of his life. I expected about half an hour's worth, 2.5 hours to read.
Instead, his wife, Sue Gorman, will read out his statement to the public inquiry into this medical disaster, and she'll tell her story too about, for instance, why they could never have children.
They discovered he'd got hepatitis C, and the next day we got a letter saying we couldn't go on with the fertility treatment. And on the same day he had an appointment with the hepatologist saying the prognosis is cirrhosis, cancer, transplant and premature death. So I was told within 24 hours that I would never have children and I was going to lose my husband young, and here I am.
More than 4,800 British haemophiliacs were infected with hepatitis C and HIV through blood products, while others were infected from transfusions. Infections also passed on to wives or partners. 25,000 people. Nearly 3,000 have died, and they continue to die, one every 4 days. This is where the London part of the inquiry is being held, but it will be moving around the country because this was a UK-wide scandal. And today the chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, said he'd already read testimony from those infected and affected. Testimony that he said was harrowing, moving and sometimes chilling. Derek Martindale is a severe haemophiliac who contracted hepatitis C and HIV. He survived. His brother Richard died. Supported today by his son John Paul, Mr. Martindale told the inquiry of his biggest regret.
He knew he was dying. He knew he had AIDS. And that he didn't have long to live. And he just wanted to talk. He wanted to talk about this, talk about his fears, how scared he was. But I couldn't. It was too close to home for me. And I wasn't there for him. I wasn't there for him. And 3 months later, he died.
The products used to make factor VIII needed for blood clotting were imported from the US, taken from prisoners and drug users. Questions will be asked about the role of government, pharmaceutical companies and the medical profession, but there are many documents missing and there are fears the full truth will never be known.
Well, we recently found that there's 1,000 files, just under 1,000 files that have been checked out by staff and never returned at the Department of Health. Some were taken by the Department for Education, other departments, and bear in mind when we say 1,000 files, each one of those files contains hundreds of pages, so we're talking about tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of documents that no other inquiry has ever seen, including the Scottish inquiry.
Then there is the money. An infected blood support scheme in England was today extended by the government. But over the years, families have been left impoverished and there has never been compensation paid.
What's been announced today is £900 for each person. It's nothing. I mean, most people would spend that on a summer holiday. These people can't because they don't have the money because they've been asking for charitable handouts for the last 40 years. And that's what's wrong with this.
A common theme is already appearing at this inquiry. It's what happened to Steve Diamond, a life dominated by illness and then cut short.
I'm going to tell the inquiry, yes, that his life opportunities were diminished, that he was taken away from him. And I'd like to tell them that they made him feel a failure. And the guy wasn't a failure.
That report from Victoria MacDonald.